I'll be drawing Stephen King's Caricature. I'm watching an interview with him, so you'll hear him talk while I work. I'll probably take a screen grab of what this looks like. Alright, without further ado, here we go. Let's draw Stephen King. Give me a second.
And in a sense, that's all right. I'm running my own race now.
What do you mean?
I mean, my family is well provided for. There's no need. If it were a matter of money, I would never have to set my pen to paper or turn on my word processor again. If it were a matter of critical acceptance, I would stop right now, because that's never going to come on the level that you just mentioned. I don't think...
Never?
No, I don't think so. Not in my lifetime, certainly, and probably not after.
But are you going to reach for it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, always. Every time that I sit down. That's why I say I'm running my own race.
Yeah.
I'm writing to please myself. And I'm my own toughest critic. I've never been able to reach to the place that I want to be at. So...
But the last two novels, this is a compilation of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. The last two novels were the best reviewed.
Yeah.
And some say a new direction for you, more in the genre of suspense than horror. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Well, I think that that's true. I think that...
As if you were reaching, stretching, growing, moving somewhere else.
Yeah. I think that people look at Gerald's Game and Dolores Claiborne. Dolores comes out in paperback next month, and I'll be interested to see how that does. Those are straight novels in the sense that there's no supernatural element, exactly. There's no hocus pocus, there's no, you'll notice that my arm goes all the way up to my shoulder and all that. They're straight novels.
How about Gerald's Game? Same thing.
Same thing.
Right.
But the basic thing is, I never said that I was a horror novelist. I never said that I was a suspense novelist. I never said I was anything except a guy who writes books.
And who
any labels that go on me, I don't accept those or reject those.
Why do you write so prolifically? Why so many? I mean, are those stories in there that have to get out, or is it...
Yeah, I think that they do, but I also think that some of it has to do with simply being fairly facile with words. That is to say, there's this story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, about James Joyce. Friend comes in, and Joyce has got his hands up on his head like this, and he's, oh, God. And the guy says, James, what's the matter? Did you have a bad day? How many words did you write? And Joyce goes, I wrote 7 words today. The guy says, that's not bad for you, James. He says, but I don't know what order they go in. And I've never been that kind of a writer. I've always known what order they go in. And I think that sometimes that very facility has caused me problems with the critics, so that I am to popular novelists sort of what Algernon Swinburne was to poets.
At the end you're just turning them out. You're just spinning them out.
And that's, in fact, that's not the case.
And what?
In fact, that's not the case.
Is it hard?
Yeah, it's hard. And it gets harder. It doesn't get any easier at all.
There's no formula. There is no magic elixir that works for you.
No, you get an idea. You play with the idea. You get to the point where you say, well, I'm certainly not going to try to write that. That would be much too difficult, and I don't have the time anyway. And then you find yourself doing it anyway. And
but once you get the idea set, and once you get do you know where the ending is before you start writing?
I usually think I do.
Yeah. But does it surprise you?
Quite often, it will not end the way that I expected it to do at all. Yeah. So it does usually surprise. Because that's good. If that happens, it means that you've got an organic, living piece of work that you're dealing with there. It's alive, it's changing, it's evolving as it goes along. If it's just sort of on the page, I remember reading one time that Earl Stanley Gardner had all these notebooks, and he would pick and mix and match, like Etch-a-Sketch and...
Yeah, right. Like painting by the numbers, so to speak?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And who would want to write that way?
Yeah. When you... Between what you finish and the editor, does the editor have much influence on your stuff, or is it pretty much now they look and say 150 million copies, Steve, looks pretty good to me? Stephen.
Oh boy. If I had an editor who felt that way, I would get a new editor
because they really do help you.
Yeah, and the thing is, there was a time in the 70s where, I'd read criticisms that would say, oh, Stephen King could publish his laundry list if he wanted to. And the horrible thing is probably now I could, publish my laundry list. I don't know how many copies it would sell, but I could probably get somebody.
A lot, except the next time you published a book.
Yeah, it would really hurt.
Yes.
So I want an editor that's fairly tough on me. I'm in the process of rewriting a book now, and I've got a manuscript that's covered with line edits. The editor's name is Chuck Verrill. He's very, very good, and at this stage in the manuscript, I could kill him.
But what does he do for you?
He
is it plot development?
He won't let me be Stephen King. That's the most important thing. He won't let me be.
He treats you as a
big
first novelist?
inflatable. Yeah, right. As somebody who has to answer for the things that they've done, he will not let me be a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade float. You know, big inflated cartoon figure. I'm supposed to still fulfill the. He'll change plot developments and sometimes suggest that a lot of stuff should be switched around. The most valuable thing from my standpoint is he will cut what I've written because I have a tendency to write long.
But you know you're doing it, so therefore it's not very painful.
It always hurts. It always hurts.
Your wife is a novelist.
That's right.
Do you show her chapter by chapter, or do you wait until you end it?
Generally speaking, I will show her a book in progress in about 3 chunks. So she will read the first third and then the first 2/3 and then the whole thing.
She's the first person to see it.
She's always the first person to see it. And when she writes her novels, she has a tendency not to show me what she's involved with or even talk about it very much. And I certainly couldn't go into her office and pick it up because she works in a way that makes me want to scream. There's pages here and there's pages there and there's pages somewhere else. And I just don't understand how anybody can work in that clutter, but she probably doesn't understand how I work either. So we do show each other our stuff. Yeah.
And she makes changes and suggests changes and talks about character development and those kind of things?
Yep. She's very tough.
Yeah. I saw, this was just amazing, a Harper magazine. I remember, I think Harper, maybe Atlantic, one of the two. And they won't be thrilled that I don't remember which one it was. A list of all the ways that you have killed people. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But I've had a long career and I've killed a lot of people, so.
Well, what's been the most, for you, the one that was the most delicious? And I choose the word delicious on purpose.
Yeah, I think probably there's a story called Survivor Type. It's a short story. It's not in Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Which, should you wonder, is on sale at a bookstore near you, even as we speak, from Viking Press. There's an earlier collection called Skeleton Crew. There's a story. This story, Survivor Type, was in that, and it didn't appear anywhere else because I couldn't sell it to a magazine. It was about a doctor who was smuggling heroin, who was on a boat that's shipwrecked, and he lands on this desert island, and there's nothing to eat. And so because he's a surgeon and he has all this anesthetic, he eats himself a piece at a time. And I remember going to this retired doctor who lived next to us and saying, how much of a person could a person like cut off before they died of shock or trauma? And I did. And this is the same guy a year before I'd gone to him and asked if it would be humanly possible for a human being to swallow a cat. So he'd gotten to a point where he didn't quite really trust me.
You were really weird, Mr. King.
No.
Much more weird than I thought.
Than you ever expected. That's
expected.
Right. So he told me a person with a strong survival instinct could actually remove quite a bit of his person.
Recently we've had a couple of examples of that where people who have been trapped and have cut off limbs in order to get loose, otherwise they would have died.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, this guy sort of eats when he cuts off. Although he did make a fire and cook some of it, so I guess it was all right.
But that's the worst.
Well, you said the tastiest.
The tastiest, delicious, yeah, all right, delicious. What's the most heinous, the worst?
Boy, you're putting me on the spot. Like I say,
there's
been so many. Deaths. I think there was a guy in Firestarter. Well, I think, let me put it this way. In Nightmares and Dreamscapes, there are this couple that are eaten alive by carnivorous toads. So, will that work?
Yes, I'll take that. Have you ever gone too far and said, no, I've gone over the line?
Well, like I say, generally speaking, I will go ahead and write them anyway, because at this point I am sort of racing myself, and I'll tend to put them away. So that there are several times where I thought I had gone too far. I thought Pet Sematary was a step too far, and it was a tremendously popular book, which shows that it's almost impossible to gross out the American people. And at this point in my career, the British, the French, and the Germans either. But I continue to
make
try.
a paraphrase of that, I think.
Yeah. I have a couple of ideas that are probably a little beyond the pale.
Yeah.
Right now.
What's your worst fear?
That one of my kids would die. That's the basis of Pet Sematary. I think the call in the middle of the night with a cop saying, brace yourself for some bad news.
Yeah, that would be the most horrible.
Yeah.
Having done all that you've done to...
Well, for me, I don't know about you, I'm a control freak. And for me...
Some say.
Well,
Yeah.
when your kids grow up, they go out on their own, and you can't protect them or insure them from the whips and scorns of outrageous fortune. You simply have to let them go. And I understand that because I'm a relatively rational human being in spite of the guy who eats himself, you know, and the carnivorous toads. I'm a rational human being, but there's a part of me that just does not want to let go, that wishes that I could ensure their success. You can't bargain with God.
You once said that the readers are interested in your secrets, not in what you've read. Meaning what?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about how if I give an interview about my career, what I do for a living, sooner or later somebody will kind of say, by the way, what was your childhood like? Yeah. People want to know where the bodies are buried. Yeah. They want to know what twisted me to do what I'm doing, and the truth is even more horrible. The answer is nothing. I'm just this way naturally.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
It's great to have you.
It's great to be here.
Stephen King, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. It's a collection. Some going back, and people say that it's delicious to read some of those that have a little bit of age on them.
Yeah. Vintage.
Great to have you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's a
The
short
Pride of
interview,
Bangor, Maine,
yeah.
Stephen King. We'll be right back. Stay with us
All right.
for a while. Tell me what kind of books do you write?
I had to rewind it because I'm not done with my drawing. All right, let's keep going. All right, guys. I'm listening to Stephen King. I thought it was interesting to hear him talk, so I figure when I draw a caricature, I'm also here and took my son to tennis, so I'm kind of just killing time. And that's a cool reason to draw caricatures, huh? Like, it's a good skill to pick up. Alright, well, I'm gonna keep going here.
Well, if you ask the ordinary run-of-the-mill reader, if there is such a guy or such a gal, I guess that I write horror novels. I think that what I actually write are suspense novels.
What's the difference?
I think that the purpose of the horror novel is to sort of gross you out. My idea of it is, and I'm not averse to this, I will do this, it's part of the fun of it, is it's kind of it's a childish thing, the way that humor is. The two things are closely allied. They both elicit, when they work to their best, a vocal reaction from the audience. Laughter if it's comedy, and a scream or a yell if it's horror. But they're both childish, and it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're sitting at the dining room table and you want to get to your sister or your brother, you kind of chew up your food and then you hang your mouth open like that. That's horror. Suspense is a little more high class than that, so maybe that's why
My mother
I
used to say that was tasteless.
That's tasteless, yeah, that's right. Well, my mother, when I was a kid, used to say, Stephen, your taste is all in your mouth. And that's true, but it has made me relatively wealthy.
Yes, not even relatively, very.
But I have a lot of relatives, so.
Do you know where it all comes from? I mean, it comes out of your imagination, but why this for you? Why not other kinds of novels?
No, I don't know where it all comes from. And that's the literal, unvarnished truth. I don't know where it comes from any more than I know where the color of my eyes comes from.
Well, I can tell
do
you where
know.
that comes from.
Well, all right, that's genetically
Right.
inherited from your mother and your father. And my mother used to enjoy writing, and my father wrote a lot of stories and mailed them to the pulp magazines of the 40s and 50s, like Argosy and that sort of thing. And I guess some of them were pretty good, but I've never seen any of them. So I have a little of that from my parents, and my children have a little of it from me.
You wanted to write from an early age.
Yeah. It was what there was for me. I always did it. I always took great pleasure in it. I still take great pleasure in it. The actual act of composition. For me, the part that I don't like starts when you turn a manuscript in to the publisher. That's like you have your own private field that's full of snow in the backyard, and nobody's tracked in it but you, and you give it to them, and then they open it to the public.
You mean that whole creation is only yours, and only you know those characters, your editor, but forget that. You are the only person who's lived with them, know where they're going, what they think, how they conflict, what's going to happen to them.
And I'm the only one that has an opinion on them. And then an editor comes along and says, well, we'll change this and that. This new one, Nightmares and Dreamscapes, a lot of the stories go back half my lifetime, actually. And so some of them were written by a very young man. And then the editor comes up and says, well, maybe if you change this or tweak that. And it's not that they're wrong. That's not what I'm saying. It's that you say, well, that was mine for a long time. Now you come in here and it's maybe too. I'm from Maine. I'm a Yankee. Maybe that's a Yankee reaction. You know, leave my backyard alone.
Do you create characters you like?
Usually I do, but I don't always create characters that I like. Sometimes I create the same, the sort of characters that I'm afraid of. When I was a kid...
You're afraid of?
Yeah. When I was a kid, there was a guy who, maybe the first of the modern serial killers. He was a guy named Charlie Starkweather.
Right.
And
he was the guy off the Texas
right.
Tower.
A little bandy. No, that's much later than this. Starkweather was in Nebraska, and it was in the 50s. And I had a scrapbook. I cut out all these clippings of him, and my mother found this scrapbook. It was 57, so I would have been about 10 years old. And I think she decided right then and there that not all my wheels were on the road anymore. And
Your elevator was not going to the top floor.
She said, why are you interested in this guy? And because I was only 10, and what articulation I had then went into the stories, and it really still does. I'm a much better writer than I am a talker. What I was not able to tell her was, there was one picture of this young man who killed these people, and what there was in his eyes was nothing at all. I mean, vacant rooms, depopulated planets, there was nothing. And what I was not able to tell her was, I need to look out for this guy. I need to know everything about him so that if I ever meet him or anybody like him, I can go around. And in my fiction, when I've created characters like John Rainbird in Firestarter, or George Stark in The Dark Half, some of the real bad guys, I'm telling myself, reminding myself, look out for these guys. These guys are dangerous, and they're really out there.
But when you were, how old did you do this? This is when you were 9?
I was about 10.
Yeah. Now, did you try to write anything then when you were 9 and 10?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and a lot of it was the sort of stuff that I write now. There were horror stories, fantasy stories. See, I grew up on a diet of, let's say, the sort of comic books that kids weren't really supposed to read, like Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror and that sort of thing. One of the earliest stories that I remember my mother reading my brother and I was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So you see, I was warped from an early age, but the idea that this sort of thing, you know, somebody will sort of want to discuss your books if you write what I write, and they'll sort of sidle up to you and say, by the way, what was your childhood like?
Of course they do.
But mine was perfectly normal as a you know, a general case.
Back to the question I asked about what kind of books do you write? Do you compare yourself with no false modesty to anyone? When you look back, who would you like to be compared to? Where do you put your work?
Generally, once it's done and bound and in a book, I put it on the shelf and forget it
or send
and
it
go
to Hollywood
to the
and
next
say,
thing.
send the check.
Yeah. There are writers that I like.
Yeah.
There are writers that I admire tremendously, and there are writers whose styles have helped me at various times that I've sort of taken into my own mix and tried to make a part of myself. I think that writers, when they're forming, are like what my mother always used to say, milk in the refrigerator takes the flavor of whatever's next to it, you know, so that as a kid, if I read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, I'd write like Lovecraft. There are a couple of pastiches in Nightmares and Dreamscapes, the new book. There's a Sherlock Holmes story.
Because there are people, the reason I asked the question, there are many who say, and this is complimentary to you, look back years from now, we'll look back at what Stephen King was writing, and we'll see you in a very different way as the audience who loves you so much and buys 150 million copies sees you. They may very well be responding to these sort of base emotions of a great story, first of all. I don't think that you would sell unless you tell a great story. I assume that you believe that as well. And
hey, if they remember me at all,
yeah.
I mean, it's amazing when you think about it, the writers who come and enjoy tremendous popularity and sort of disappear so that you find their works on back shelves in hotel suites or in, you know, bargain barns in New England. If I could write one book, let's say, in my genre that would be remembered the way that Dracula has been remembered, I love the idea of the novel Dracula because it's shameless pulp fiction and it's melodramatic and it has a lot of things in it that critics consider to be vices, and yet it's enjoyed its own life.
It stood the test of time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you believe yours will stand the test of time?
Boy, I'd like to think so, and I think some of it has a chance because horror fiction, as a general rule, lives its own guerrilla life, so that sometimes it's the kind of thing where one kid will tell another, have you read this? Yeah. You know, and they'll go and get it out of the library. And I think that some of that stuff does have a tendency to last.
What, both on the superficial level, at the top level, not superficial, but at the very top, what is it that makes it so attractive, so it sells so many copies? Yours and others. What is it about the whatever? You don't call it horror, your work, horror. You don't call yourself a horror novelist, but whatever.
I will say things to you that nobody else will say, and I will show you things that nobody else
that
dares
are so horrible to imagine.
Show to you. That's right. And again, it shares the same attraction as comedy, which says the same thing. Comedy humor says, comedy humor. Get me out of here. I just washed my mouth and I can't do a thing with it. But a movie that's really funny, that really makes people laugh, is generally saying, I'm going to show you something that you haven't seen before. So that when Mel Brooks did Blazing Saddles back in '74 or whatever it was, and the cowboys eat beans and then sit around the fire and they start to fart.
Right.
Well, nobody had ever heard anybody actually fart in a movie, and we all fell on the floor laughing. You know, it made that movie. So it was something that had been previously forbidden. You know, we all know about it. We all know that people pass gas, but nobody had ever put it on the big screen before.
And here, what are you doing? It's forbidden.
Well, for instance, in Pet Sematary, what I said was, here's something that we don't talk about. People sometimes have kids who die. There are terrible things that happen, and sometimes a child will die young. And in Pet Sematary, that happened, and I followed the family through the grieving process, and then the father goes out to the graveyard and digs his son up and tries to bring him back to life. And that can't happen. That is a total make-believe thing, just in case any of your viewers out there thought that they could dig people up and bring them back to life. It doesn't work that way. But in fiction, sometimes it can. And the important part about it, you know, I like to say that fiction is a lie, but good fiction is the truth inside the lie. And the truth that any person who's ever lost a child knows is that you wish you could bring them back to life. And the story explores what might happen if something like that could happen. So horror fiction, a lot of it, to me, is the lure of the forbidden.
Of the forbidden. Now, at a deeper or additional level, is it also some sense of dealing with your own fears?
I think it is. I think that...
By comparison, by what?
Well, by comparison, saying as bad as things are, they're not this bad. There are two stories...
As scared as you might be, this is the deepest and darkest.
This is the deepest, but on a level where I like to work now, because I've been here for a long time, I've done a lot of this stuff. I'm terrified of self-parody. I'm terrified of running out of ideas and just recycling the old stuff. The thing that interests me the most right now is the fact that sometimes things happen that are terrible, and there doesn't seem to be any clear reason why. There are two stories in Nightmares and Dreamscapes. There's one called Rainy Season, and there's another one called The Moving Finger.
Right.
Rainy Season is about these tourists who are just sort of besieged by killer toads.
Right.
And The Moving Finger is a story about an accountant from Queens who one night sees a finger poke out of the bathroom drain. Just a finger, and it keeps getting longer. And in neither case are these phenomena explained. One of the things that, particularly in Hollywood, that filmmakers like you to do is to explain where these monsters came from, or whatever the phenomena was. What started this, which is ridiculous
Why
when
would
you
they
think
want
about
to
it.
go?
All right. Well, thank you very much for hanging in there with me drawing Stephen King. Hope you all enjoy it. You guys all have a good one. Thank you so much. Bye. If you guys are interested in supporting my channel or want to own some of my artwork, um, this is available for you. It's my caricature book. It's all the drawings I've done from the present all the way to high school. It is in hardcover and paperback. Okay. And if you're interested in other works I've done, you can just click on my name right here. And I have a book here. The difference in prices is this is premium pages and this is black and white, but they're still hardcover. And I have a paperback of this version. So again, if you want to support my channel, go ahead and buy my books. And if you guys like the content, just leave me a message and I will reply. Thank you.